Hey gentlefolk, my name is Malte Krug. Welcome back to another episode of All About Keys. And again, in this episode I will show a unit that is not represented in the July 1986 issue of the German Keyboards magazine, but one that got outshone by the Prophet VS last month. The Akai S900 12-bit sampler. But before we learn what this thing is able to do, here's the content of the magazine first, as usual. The front cover of this month's Keyboard magazine holds a picture of Chick Corea. This is very 80s style and taken from the poster of his tour in 1986. Followed by the usual content list, but I rather like to point your attention to the left page. Here we can find an ad for Dynacord's Rhythm Stick. I mentioned this instrument already in the Messe News a few months back, and here it can be seen in full color glory. There are a few videos on YouTube showing off how this thing is played and how it sounds. The letters to the editor, and only 2 pages of news mirroring the dry month during summer, followed by a feature about the feel of playing an acoustic piano, plus the connection to electronic gear via MIDI. The sound buzzer sneaks in early this time, but with only 2 sounds for the DX7, sent in by readers for others to enjoy. And on this double page we get hit by a 4-color photo of Chick Corea and his live rig. Yamaha has been a main endorser for him over decades. Some might remember the Chick Corea demo for the SY99, which included a spoken sentence and a version of an album song, and so it is no wonder that in those days he played the fantastic KX88, which sits on top of a MIDified Rhodes Mark V. The latter, by the way, got sampled by Yamaha for the Motif series and can also be found in the latest montages. Behind him there are 2 TX816 synthesizer racks about which I made a video here. On the right, from the bottom to the top, a Kurzweil 250, a Synclavier and a Lin 9000. Which according to the gear list on this page is only used as a sequencer. The article starts with summing up the years of Mr. Corea's career and released records up to that point in time, and part 2 is the interview, followed by a transcription of some improvisations taken from a Chick Corea song, including some tips of how to rehearse these lines, if you like to attempt to do so. The second featured artist is Billy Payne, who since the early 70s played on uncountable records for a lot of famous musicians. Compared to Chick Corea's, his gear seems a bit less hefty to lug around, and according to the list here, contains 3 DX7s, an Oberheim Expander, a TX816 and a Casio CZ101 on top of a CP70. His crew might have thanked him for that, I guess. This month's giveaway is another multi-track recorder. And I bet it's taken from last month's big 4-track comparison, and Tascam offered their entry. The only reason I can think of for taking pictures of the cassette lid open are unwanted reflections of lights or the camera itself. In the technology special we get instructions to DIY build a digital analog converter for the Atari ST. This includes schematics for the circuit board. Nowadays we're used to recording digitally and tapeless into the computer. In the semi-professional range in the mid-80s, you could have at least the final step in the digital realm, the master recording. By then using one of Sony's PCM recorders in connection with a regular stereo video recorder. Prices range from around $500 to $2,000 of mid-1980s dollars, triple that number to compare that to nowadays dollar value. There were of course even more expensive systems around in those days, which could easily break your bank. The CZ1 is the final model of Casio's successful line of digital synthesizers, whose sound generation is basically the same, but who differ in other features. One has mini keys, the 101, or another added a sequencer. The CZ1 is the only one with a dynamic and aftertouch-capable keypad, although the tester didn't like how the internal sounds actually respond to those dynamic inputs. The MIDiverb is the 3rd effects unit made by Alesis following the XT and the XTC. It's a preset-only digital reverb with 63 programs, including the unavoidable gated reverb patches. These small reverb units sound pretty good considering the low budget range it is aimed at. I still use them regularly. It looks like as if Alesis wanted you to have this sitting on top of a keyboard. For a rack-shaped housing we had to wait for the MIDiverb 2, which by the way is the first effects unit I ever bought. For approximately double the money you could instead get the Ibanez SDR stereo digital reverb. Unlike most other even more expensive reverbs, which allow to be fed with a stereo signal but sum both channels down to mono before calculating a stereo effect, the Ibanez SDR 1000 is true stereo. If the input signal does a panning through the stereo field or is just balanced to one side, the effect signal that gets added is correctly panned, or weighed as well. In dual reverb mode, it's even possible to add different reverbs to each of the incoming channels. The high-tech MIDI timecode tape synchronizer. This was used to synchronize any MIDI gear like a sequencer or a computer software to analog tape. And I'll show how this worked in its own video, together with other synchronizers. The Roland TR-505 is a smaller sibling to the TR-707. Smaller means reduced in some features like the missing individual outputs, but larger in the aspect of the range of instrument samples. This also contains percussion samples. Somehow, none of the TRs ever made it into my collection. The hands-on section starts with the piano workshop. More licks for beginners, this time for rock music. The drum computer workshop concentrates this time on the drum patterns of a single song, Kyrie by Mr. Mister. On 3 pages we get the drum computer pattern grids and the notation. In the synthesizer workshop we learn the physical basics about reed instruments like flutes, clarinets, oboes, saxophones or bassoons, including a historical overview here on the right. I guess we learn how to incorporate this knowledge into a synthesizer sound next time. Hubertus Maas returns to the DX7 and analyzes a sound he got directly from Reinhold Heil, the keyboard player from the band Spliff, who programmed it for a song of their then current album Schwarz auf Weiß. Here you have the pad sheet as usual. Check out the song Rosalie for how he uses it. The Home Recording Workshop series about recording techniques informs us this time about suitable ways to record different types of guitars. Chord intervals and their application in scales is again the subject of the Jazz Piano Workshop. MIDI practice this time builds onto last month's introduction and goes more into detail. What are the differences between a MIDI out and a MIDI through? Why would I need to know that? And why the MIDI channels? And a checklist to go through if something is not working MIDI-wise before you go back to the shop to moan about your broken MIDI thing. In Basic Music Knowledge, Dieter Falk gives an introduction to improvisation, starting with harmonizing a melody with chord notes, following a regular lead sheet. This can be somewhat unfamiliar to classic pianists, who are used to having everything written down to the last note, but for jazzers and rockers, this is standard. And last but not least, the small ads on a few pages of the flea market. But before we get to the instrument of the month, I would like to share something that spontaneously came to my mind when I saw this Casio ad. They were marketing the CZ1000 and the SZ1 sequencer as a dream couple. The younger CZ5000 contains basically a package of 2 CZ1000s with a full 5-octave keypad and the SZ1 style sequencer with twice the track count. Well, maybe they need a room in the warehouse somewhere? But now for the main act of this episode, the Akai S900, which, as mentioned, had its test already in last month's issue of the German Keyboard-Magazin. And here we have the first sampler in this series coming from Japan. The Akai S900 12-bit sampler. It has more RAM than the other 2 samplers I already introduced to you. A hefty memory space of 750 kilobytes. For 1986 that's been an enormous step up. It is 6 times the RAM of the Mirage and 3 times of what the Prophet 2000 offered. So what about the other specs? The Akai S900 is also 8-voice polyphonic. Sampling rates range from 7.5 up to a maximum of 40 kHz, which results in almost 12 seconds of sampling time at the highest fidelity. It can hold up to 32 samples in memory, which can be spread over the keyboard in various ways in 32 key groups per program. Programs are the highest level in the sound hierarchy. You select those for playing. These specs are only correct for an S900 running the earlier OS version 1.2, but as you can see, while mine is booting, it loads version 4 from the floppy disk. This version adds some software features from the follow-up model S950, and 3 of the main features could already be seen on the display while it booted. The S950 is basically an S900 with more RAM of up to 2.25 megabytes, maximum sampling rate of 48 kHz, and it can also use HD floppies with up to 1.4 megabyte of space. When the optional SCSI interface gets installed, it's even possible to use hard drives with it. The S950 looks pretty much the same as the tad older sibling, and I have one living just a bit higher in my rack. It has full RAM but no SCSI, but I never missed that. Of course, these new hardware features cannot be added to the S900 just by using a newer version of the OS, but now it's possible to have the same amount of samples, key groups and programs as with the S950, up to 99 each, if memory allows. Some editing parameters get also added, and I'll point them out when we trip over them on our journey. One thing the S950 loses, compared to the S900, is the possibility to install the ASK90 trigger input board. Together with drum triggers or trigger microphones coming from a real drum set, the S900 gets turned into a full-blown eDrum brain. If you wanted the same functionality for the S950, Akai offered an extra rack unit for it. While checking the back, we can look at all of the connectors. There's a mono mix out, which we are mostly going to use because the two stereo left and right outputs show a similar strange behavior as the Prophet 2000. Voices bounce unpredictably between the left and right output. Pretty annoying and unnaturally sounding when playing a piano. Or whatever sound, actually. The individual outs are more useful than the counterparts of the Prophet 2002 rack, because you can route individual key groups to outputs instead of having the physical voices hardwired to the outputs. This makes it much more predictable which signal is coming from where. Very useful when you use the S900 as a drum brain or a multi-timbral instrument. More on that later. The ports on the back get completed by the obligatory MIDI trio and an RS-232 port for faster serial communication with other devices. Regular S900 users might notice I installed a proper IEC connector to get rid of the Japanese two-prong power cable, which always disappears when you need it. Let's check out some sounds now. I will point out features and special behavior when we get to them. We'll hear sounds that Akai offered in the day, but mostly from the later disc series for the S950. These sound better than what Akai offered in the early years. After that, I would like to demonstrate with a simple saw wave, sampled from the X5, what the S900 can do as a synthesizer. OS4 adds an additional ADSR envelope for the analog filter, which normally is only static. No resonance, though. A single floppy disk could hold the same amount of data as the RAM, and loading one of these takes approximately 40 seconds. I'll edit out the loading times as usual. From left to right on the front panel, there's the floppy drive, contrast knob for the display. Below the display, you have the 8 mode buttons: play, record, edit, sample, edit program, MIDI, utility, which does nothing if you don't have the triggers installed, disk, of course, we're going to use it in a sec, and master tune, which only has this one page. We can go through the pages using page up and down, of course, the cursor to go back and forth. Some pages have more than just one choice. And once in a while, when you need to switch something on off, you got an on-off button here and a 10-digit keyboard, or you turn the control dial. Here are inputs. You got a mic input and a line input. I connect the output of the X5 directly. If you need your hands-free to trigger recording or playback of samples, you can use a foot switch connected to this. Then you have 3 knobs for various volumes, record level, output left and right, which also influences the mix output we're going to use, and the monitor. And the monitor is giving us the signal that's connected to the inputs. What we're hearing now is just a sine wave coming from the S900. When it boots, you get a lone program which plays a sine wave. This is good for checking connections, and some people use this to add some sub-bass to their regular samples. So let's load a piano. Entire disk, clear memory and load. This will take around 40 seconds. So here we have the tone program on 1. On 2 there's the grand piano, and you can use this to scroll, but there's nothing else, so there's only one extra program. This is the sound everybody wanted from a sampler in the day. There's a loop. With not a lot of RAM memory for samples, you have to loop the sounds. The problem with that is, if you hold a chord, At some point, the whole sound sounds static, or you have an interaction between the loops from different samples, and there will be examples later on. So this goes pretty low. From here on downwards, it's just one sample. And it disappears fast, so playing more rhythmically might be more suitable for this, because the important bit, like Roland noticed for the D50, is the attack. After the initial attack, it sounds a bit dead, actually. This is still the better one of the two pianos I found in my library. The sounds, by the way, are taken from libraries I found online, and those disk images I put on disks. Of course, you can put in a Gotek floppy emulator, but I like to keep my machines in original shape. Okay, more sounds in a sec. I wanted to use editor software to show a graphical representation of the S900 sound structure, and first I wanted to use this. Steinberg Sound works for the Akai S900 for the Atari ST computer. And although I tried two copy protection dongles, different floppy disks, and all of the ST models I could lay my hands on, the program always froze after showing the Steinberg logo. I used 3 different computer models of 1040s, including an 1040 STE, Mega ST1, and a Mega STE, to no avail. The only reason I could think of why it didn't work is that all my STs are running on TOS 1.04. Maybe I should downgrade one of the 1040s to 1.0 for the programs of the early era of these computers. Unfortunately, there are no adaptations for my beloved Sound Diver or MIDI Quest to fiddle around with the S900. Normally those show the structure pretty good. So I looked somewhere else, and there's an editor for the S900/950 running on Android. But still nothing worked when trying this on 2 of my devices, a phone and a tablet, while using a Steinberg UR22 Mark II as a MIDI interface. The app didn't want to communicate with the S900, or just closed. Not so well spent 22 euros, I would say. So if you like to deal with one of these puppies to put some spice on your sounds, be prepared to do the legwork on the machine itself. Everybody was looking for sounds that their synthesizers couldn't do. And orchestra sounds are one of them. Sort of aliasing happening. That sounds reminds me of an old Atari Jaguar game, Alien vs. Predator. Orchestra. They're always sneaking some timpanis in there. How about straight strings? So, if I can believe my notes, these have bad loops. Oh yeah. And these loops And the sounds were from the so-called SL library and the S900 operating system before version 2, I think, couldn't do crossfade loops. That's why you got these. Another groove again. But with the operating system 4, among other things, crossfade looping is possible. And when we get to the sampling process, after we listen to some sounds, I will get more into detail about the edit sample parameters and edit program parameters. Okay, what else? Something no synthesizer could do. You could also go to the programs by just hitting the numbers here. That's actually a loop used for a nice effect. Somebody should edit the envelope to not have this thud at the end. More examples for bad loops, and I think this is even just one sample. Yeah, things we had to deal with in the day. And whoever played the violin and the cello were not exactly in time. Which is apparent when you play lower and slower, of course. Another thing that's a bit annoying is that the envelope is not like a one-shot. The S900 OS4 has this function, special one-shot mode, they call it. Because when you use drum triggers, they only give a short impulse, and then it would be nice if the sample would actually play to the end. Otherwise it would sound very machine gun-like. But there's another sound here. Kalimba. And I think that has a nice bass. Like a thumb piano from Africa. And they're never that large that they could actually reach down here. I like that. Stack that with a regular bass sound and you get some nice low attacks. Now for something to check out the higher range fidelity of this sampler. There's a weird resonance in that one, in that range at least. Now for a sound that was very popular in the 80s. Fretless bass. There's some hissing going on. I like it down here, although the loop sucks a bit. Brazil guitar. But I like the sound actually. Okay, ukulele up here, but and don't hold it. Still a sound from the early series. Samples are organized in key groups, and these are the shells for the samples. Key groups determine which sample gets played where on the keyboard, or with which MIDI channel. So multi-timbrality in the S900 is handled on the key group level. You're not putting programs on different MIDI channels, that would be too easy. Each of the key groups, 32 on a regular S900 and 99 when OS version 4 is used, like I said, can contain two samples called the soft and hard sample. The latter is referred to as the loud sample in the manual, so don't mix it up. Defining a dynamic threshold in the key group will result in switching between the two samples depending on how hard the key is played. That might add realism when imitating a dynamic snare drum, or this conga, or switching from a picked bass to a slapped one. Key groups can cover whatever range, from one key to the whole keyboard, which makes it also possible to stack them onto one another. This is only restricted by the 8-voice polyphony. Key groups work somewhat similar to what in a Prophet 2000 sampler is called maps. This has the advantage that programs with empty key groups can be used as templates, and checking out a different snare can easily be done. It's possible to use the same sample in multiple key groups. Key groups are organized into programs, which are the top level of the sound hierarchy. We already listened to some. The same key group cannot be used in multiple programs, but with version 4, there's a copy-paste parameter for copying key groups from one program to another if needed. It's just not called copy-paste, but put and get. Now we're getting into the Akai S950 range of sample library, which is still called SL, but it's SL5 and then 3-digit number to indicate which disk. Some of these S950 library disks cannot be loaded in an S900 because OS4 introduces another feature of the S950 into the S900 that sampling data on the disk can be compressed, so it won't take up that much room on a floppy. The regular S900 could not load these, but an OS4 S900 could do this, so that's why this is working. But there might be a problem with samples that are using 48 kilohertz as a sampling rate. That is something the S900 cannot do. So some of the S950 library disks won't load on the S900, no matter which operating system version, but still they can be loaded into the S950. I tried. And this is in a different ballpark. But again, only the attacks are good. The loop sucks. It's not an organ, it's an electric piano. So what are we gonna do? Edit program. We select that one that we're working on. Key loudness is fine. But I'm looking for, here we can use different key groups to affect, like pitches and ranges and so on, but I want to edit all of them. Because filter is doing nothing, by the way. This attack. Let's just don't use. Maybe a bit longer decay. That was easy. And this is a much more natural feeling to play this. Still, it's pretty dead when the loop kicks in. That can be hidden a bit when using effects. Nope, not Bon Jovi. Big brass. But that needs fixing of the envelope, and as we can see in the list, edit program, page 9 is the envelope. Add some release. Better, and it's easy. Use your ears. This is a disc with a sound where the Prophet really excelled. I like it, and I think I like these as well. It should stop at some point, but it's good sound. I like it. That is okay. And by the way, we're back in another sample set, which is supposed to work with both machines. But let me tell you, not all of these worked on the S900. I guess that can count as a synthesizer sound. At least the filter is used and velocity is having an effect on the filter. Live drums. No dynamics on the most important instrument. So now we're working on key group 1. 2, there's the snare. Velocity sensitive, loudness 30. So, already better, still. Machine gun, attack. The harder I hit, the more we hear from the sample. And does the filter do something for dynamics? It's already much better. Drums on this floppy are better. Lin 9000. Yeah. Yeah, I like that. But there could still be a bit dynamic. Let's do the same again. Where do we have the snare? Velocity on loudness. That could be heftier. Oh, they're actually using two different key groups for that. Better. Pianoplex, whatever that is. Just don't hold it too long. I like the sound. Isn't it looped? I guess not. I don't know why, but from the beginning on, together with choirs, when it came to samplers, I liked flutes. They were even in some songs of my album, but then they came from the VL1. These sound very melotronic, but good. Unlike on the Mellotron, these are looped. Not too shabby. So there's one gliss going up and one gliss going down, depending on the velocity. But I like the bass from the regular harp sound. So let's see if we can get rid of the key groups. There are 4. So key group 4 is the gliss up, or the loud sample is of course gliss down. So let's get rid of key group 4. Select 4. Hit minus for delete, and gone it is. So let's listen to the bare harp. So far I like this best. So this is something that Roland made famous in their JV series of synthesizers, switching do-bars. Choirman. Yeah. I like these. Okay. So I emptied the S900 again. We still only have the basic tone program with the sine wave for sampling. Go to record, of course. And for naming something, you have to hit letter. So this stops flashing. And let's say saw. And space you can actually use there. Through monitoring, we're gonna use normal mode. Audio bandwidth, how far can we go? 16,000. Yeah, why not? It's gonna be a short. But we're just gonna record. We're just gonna record half a second. Oh, we don't even need half a second. Okay, 300 milliseconds. I want audio level. I don't want to sample the piano, so I need a saw wave. We have one, but the level is a bit too harsh. As you can see on the lower row on the display is our level meter, and these dots mark the overload. T is the threshold, and I turn it down because we are on audio trigger sampling. As soon as I hit any key here and then hit the note, it'll sample. Now it's waiting. Okay. There it is. This is our sample. It's already a bit dynamic. Start point. Auto. Now we can go to looping. Oh, come on. The loop is not so nice. Loop length. Because the end is always the same as the end of the sample. But we could still use the auto loop function. And that actually works well with this easy material. To regain some valuable memory space, we could resample at half bandwidth, but this is replacing the original. So it's advisable to save the sample we just got onto a floppy, but the other thing is much more important. Discard before start after end, which just means truncate. And that's it. And here's the function that I already mentioned, the crossfade loop, which we won't need here. So, but what we can do now, we go to edit program. Let's rename this to saw wave or something. So we selected that. In the first key group, I want a different sample. I don't want the tone. Then I go back and copy the key group. So now we got 2, and I want to transpose the second key group an octave higher. That gives us 2 oscillator sound. And then we could go to page 17, which is the new filter envelope. It would be nice to have it actually close to the volume envelope on page 9, but because they added it on second thought, it's farther away. But now I want to change the filter, and I'm switching to all key groups. So if I do this now, we can hear the filter. And if we go to 17 now, we have this filter envelope. The amount is impacting or negatively. That would result in an inverted filter envelope. Let's set the decay. Okay, the release a bit shorter, but the release on the envelope can be. Okay, back to the filter envelope. But another thing we can do, now I'm going back to key group 2, is the fine transposing. That's basically the detuning of the individual oscillators. Oh, and here you can hear that one of the oscillators is folding back. That's a bit like with the Hammond organ. When you're using the higher drawbars, the octaves are going to fold back to a lower one. Get those quint detuned sounds from the synthesizer. So we're coming from here. Layer those. And the filter sounds juicy, but there's no resonance. So forget about the 1970s doo-doo-doo-doo drums. That is, together with all the sounds I played, basically what you can do when you try to think about the S900 as a synthesizer. The Akai S900. As you could see in here, its capabilities as a synthesizer are limited compared to the other samplers I already showed you, like the Ensoniq Mirage and the Sequential Prophet 2000. Maybe being a Japanese company, Akai just had different priorities than the American counterparts. The factory floppies represent what they thought that people wanted. Realistic sounding instrument imitations as an addition to the sounds players already achieved with their synthesizers. And being a year younger, the S900's technical specs are slightly better than from the competitors' models. Still only 8 voices though, but more RAM and more individual samples. And using the sampler in conjunction with one of Akai's synthesizers, like the VX90, connected with the mentioned multi-pin voice output, adds the missing synthesis features to the samples of the S900. Unfortunately, I don't own any of the synth models that would fit, otherwise that feature would have been part of this video. Please leave a comment down below if you are somebody who used 2 Akai units this way. As usual, some of the factory sounds are a bit lackluster, but sampling your own sounds is more fun anyway. This is not a sampler I would go to for analog-style sound design, but for putting some nice 12-bit grid onto loops or any other sounds and fiddling around with sampling data in using like splicing and layering samples, the S900 does a great job. There's a reason why these and the later S950s are still sought after. In the next episode, I will take a look at a machine that follows a contrary concept compared to the Akai. The Korg DSS-1 is a synthesizer that happens to be able to sample as well. Thanks again for watching. I appreciate your time. Please consider subscribing to my channel and do the usual clicking down below. You know the drill. See you again soon on All About Keys.